Yeah, Carla, I think you're right. It is a little unbalanced there.
I know.
But,
The building.
yeah, it's okay. We are on a solid foundation around here.
Right.
Man, it's good to see you all on both sides. Today we're going to talk about Elisha. Now there's a lot to talk about with Elisha. We're just going to look at one little thing. So in the past, this is the last part of a three-part sermon. And in the past we've looked at Abraham following God. We've looked at Gideon trusting God. Today we're going to look at Elisha setting his sail to see God. Now, again, if you weren't here for any of the other ones, the idea about a sailboat is you've got a couple of choices. You can do nothing and just let the current carry you. You can do nothing around here today in our community and in our world and just let whatever currents and waves of opinion move you from place to place. Or you can try to do all the work yourself. Some people out there think that they just got to work and work and work to make God happy enough with them to let them into heaven. And that is just not what the Bible teaches us. And doing the work ourselves, sometimes it's really hard, and sometimes it doesn't work that way at all. Or we can set our sail to the wind and let it drive you to shore. We could just let God move us, and let God empower us. And so that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit. The last kind of component in this setting our sails to God. Well, the wind that we've talked about in the past couple of weeks is that movement of God. And so I think Henry Blackaby was a guy that said it, that I think the first time I ever read it. If he wasn't first, I don't know, but it touched my heart. He said, instead of knocking yourself out, trying to do things for God, see where God's working and jump in. Yeah, just look at where the Holy Spirit is moving and jump into it and get on with the work. We don't have to keep reinventing things. We can just work with God. And so here in 2 Kings chapter 6 and verses 8 and 9, we see once, when the king of Syria was warring against Israel, he took counsel with his servants, saying that such and such a place shall be my camp. But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware that you don't pass this place, for the Syrians are going down there. So God is at work here. Now Elisha is this man of God. We don't know that he's doing anything on his end other than living his life for God like he's been doing. He's just being God's man, doing what he needs to do wherever it is that he is. And what God is doing is reaching out and telling him the plans of the Syrian army. So, I mean, he's not out there just actively beating the bushes, checking for informants, and he's not sneaking into the Syrians' camp. He's just being the guy God wants him to be, and God's telling him stuff, and he's passing it along. And he's telling his king, this is where they're going to be camping. That's an incredible information source right there, where you know where your enemy's going to be. I mean, we're talking about a time with no radar and none of those fun ways that we have for finding out where everybody is. They just had to rely on somebody seeing somebody, sending out scouts and hope they don't get caught, that kind of stuff. Israel didn't have to worry about it. They knew exactly where they were going to be. And they could either attack them or go around them, whatever they felt like doing at the time. And so in 10:11 we see the story go on. And the king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God told him. Thus he used to warn him, so that he saved himself there more than once or twice. So this happened repeatedly. And the mind of the king of Syria was greatly troubled because of this thing. Can you imagine that? Now, I'm really looking at the side of God in this because I like to think I'm on that side. But we should look at the other side too. And as ourselves, think about this. Have you had plans, and you don't have to say anything, have you had plans that just every single way you try to do it doesn't work? I mean, you can't even say that there's a person opposed to you. It's like it feels like the entire universe is against what you're trying to do. Well, maybe it is. Maybe you need to think about it again. Either a brand new approach, or maybe there's a better thing to do. These might be small hints. The king of Syria has been getting these small hints that maybe he needs to adjust his thinking. And this is what he does for it. He calls the servants and says, "Will you not show me who of us is for the king of Israel? Who is my traitor? Who's against me here?" He's asking. And we feel that way when our plans don't work well. Who's against it? Why isn't it working? Well, maybe it's something we need to have perseverance with. Maybe it's something we need to just do differently. And that's where just seeing where God works comes into play. I mean, you might be involved in something that's relatively not one way or the other. Hard to see where the right or wrong choice would be. Some job decisions are like that. I mean, it gets as easy as which place you're going to go eat lunch. Because I think I have seen in my life sometimes that the place you pick, that determines who you're going to see. And maybe if you pair the right place with the right meeting, you get to bless somebody's heart. And maybe God works that together. But if you get all like uppity with him and do your own thing all the time and don't listen, maybe you don't make that connection. So he wanted to know who was against him. And here's the response we get. And one of his servants said, "None, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom." I mean, he's really getting his pocket picked here. What I think is wonderful is that his servants know that Elisha is ratting him out for everything that happened. I get God telling Elisha where the Syrian king is going and everything else. But nobody looks like any effort to conceal the fact that God is telling Elisha and Elisha is telling his king. Relatively common knowledge here, except for the king, who's out of the loop. But his servants knew it was Elisha. So here's where you're at one of these crossroads. All the stuff I've been trying to do, it's not working. Why is it not working? Because this man of God over in Israel is working against me. He's telling the king of Israel stuff he had no way to know. So what is my response going to be? And it's not working. And now I've identified this guy that's kind of in the way. Although, I don't see how he's doing it. So what's my response going to be? Maybe the God of Israel is the right God, and maybe I need to rethink what I'm doing, and maybe I need to come up with a different plan. Maybe recognizing that Israel, that's God's people. The one true God's people, and maybe I shouldn't attack them anymore. Those things could have run through the king of Syria's head. But did they? No. Why? Because, like most humans and most males, we're just going to beat our head against that wall for a while longer. And so he says, "Go and see where he is, that I might send and seize him." It was told him, "Behold, he is in Dothan. Not so I can go and seek him out and ask for his wisdom like he's been giving wisdom to his king. I'm going to go grab him." You see, the God of Israel is telling him stuff he has no way of knowing. So obviously, I can just go grab him and do what I want with him. He's really missing the point. People today really miss the point all over the place. We as Christians, we have access to all this knowledge in the Bible, and we still miss the point so often. If there's an example of rowing your own boat, it's the king of Syria thinking he's going to seize Elisha and just make him stop doing what he's doing. So the story goes on. Verses 14 and 15. "So he sent their horses and chariots and a great army. And they came by night and surrounded the city. Now, just for a moment, I want you to think. It doesn't say so here. But every time the Syrian army has been moved, God has told Elisha about it, right? And he's told his king about it. Now, when you're up against something like that, how do you move your army and surprise anybody? Including the guy that's been knowing what you're up to. And see, there's the flaw in the logic that the king has. But anyway, he does it anyway. When the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. Now, it doesn't say exactly here, but we can infer that the man went back inside as quickly as he went out. That's going to change your mind about the morning chores when you look out and you see an enemy army surrounding you. And he says, "Alas, my master, what shall we do?" So, Elisha has been getting word every time the Syrian army moves. But Elisha might not necessarily be telling his servant. So the servant is like, "Oh my goodness, what are we going to do?" I don't think Elisha was a bit surprised by this action. He probably went to bed knowing it was coming. He woke up knowing it was going to be okay. And I don't know if he just forgot or just wanted to wait and see what his servant did. He walked out the door. I don't know how that worked. But the servant's flipping out a little bit. What are we going to do? Well, this is where you set your sails. His reply to him was, "Don't be afraid." I want you to think about that for a second. Every time, on the one hand, you think to yourself, what am I going to do? The immediate response needs to be, I'm not going to be afraid. Hey, whatever it is, work out a plan. Figure things out. Pray. Do whatever you got to do there. But don't be afraid. Because we're not called to be afraid. It's just not what we're supposed to be. Cautious, definitely. I'm all about being cautious. That's great. Be cautious. Careful. Be careful. Be wise in what you do. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. For those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Now, I just can't even imagine the facial expressions of this guy. He goes out, probably pick up some water or whatever first thing in the morning. He sees this mighty army. I'm just thinking he drops the bucket and runs back in the house. He tells him, his master, Elisha, "Look, what are we going to do?" Elisha's like, "Don't worry about it. Our army is bigger than their army. You think this guy isn't confused yet? I mean, come on." He's thinking, in this house, there is you and there is me. And out there is all of them. In this church, there is you and there's me. And out there's all of those people that might not like Christians or that don't like the message that we have or the love that we share. But you know what? There are more with us than there are with them. And then Elisha prayed and said, "O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see." So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. The angels of heaven set about, armed, ready for the conflict. And I gotta figure Elisha was seeing it all along. He knew it. I mean, can't you picture that? Anyway, in football terms, if you were going to go out, if we were just going to put together a few of us to go play football against the Razorbacks, okay? You might think that'd be scary. But what if we were told that we get to sit on the bench and, I'm going to let you fill in the blank, your favorite pro football team is going to come in and play for us. There's no way to pick the right team on that for the illustration. I'm thinking probably the worst end of the pro teams could take the Razorbacks. Not that they're not good, it's just different caliber of play. And that's what Elisha's looking at. I get to sit on the sidelines, and God himself is going to fight this battle. I have zero to worry about. It's a done deal here because God is above all of it. Now here's the thing. What I've always thought about, and this could just be me, I'm willing to say that. I think that whatever Elisha asked God to do, he would have done in that moment. I think if Elisha asked God to wipe out the Syrian army, he would have had his angels do it. I think that they had this thing going in that moment, where this one was Elisha's call. But I also think, and see, you guys, a lot of the stuff that you and I do every single day, it's our call to do it, right? God allows us to be people who make choices. Now, we can choose, even in the right path, there's usually more than one trail. I think Elisha probably would have been in his rights to do it with anything he asked God to do with these guys. But there's also wisdom in some courses of action. And he sought that out. I want you to see what he said here in verses 18 and 19. And when the Syrians came down against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, please strike this people with blindness. Now, I got to tell you, I'm more of a, heavy-handed Christian in that I would have been like, kill him, God. Just wipe him out. I want to watch this happen. Might not be a preachery thing, but I'm just saying that my first guess would have been take out the enemy. I'm not alone in that, I don't think. But Elisha was playing a longer game. He said, just strike them blind. So he struck them with blindness in accordance with the prayer of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, this isn't the way, this isn't the city. Follow me, I'll bring you to the man who you see. And he led him to Samaria. Oh, you guys can't see right now, but you're in the wrong place. Let me show you where you need to go. So he marches these guys right to the king of Israel. And as soon as they entered Samaria, Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. Now the thing is, as soon as they enter Samaria, he took them to the king of Israel, who no doubt has surrounded them with his army at this point. So when they open their eyes, they're not looking at the house of a prophet they're supposed to seize and kidnap. They are surrounded by an army and a force that they have no chance against. That's really an eye-opening experience. So the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they're in the midst of Samaria. As soon as the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, my father, shall I strike them down? Shall I strike them down? I read this with emphasis. I think he got pretty excited about this. The king of Israel, he wants to kill him. This is the enemy. It's what you do to the enemy. I mean, hand delivered. Come on. It doesn't get any better than this. But you see, even the king of Israel asked Elisha what he ought to do with it. You know, that sometimes we get, even in the middle of victory, we get all impetuous and we do something wrong. And the king of Israel, I don't think there's any doubt what he wanted to do here. He asked twice, come on. But what does he end up doing? He's asking Elisha, what should I do? And he answered, you shall not strike them down. Would you strike down those who you've taken captive with your sword or with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master. Now that might sound pretty nutty. But he prepared for them a great feast, and when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. Look how this ends. And the Syrians did not come again on raids into the land of Israel. Now they could have killed them. And losing men in a battle happens all the time. But when you took the biggest, best force he had, blinded them, led them to Syria, to the king, opened their eyes, had the opportunity to kill them, and instead fed them and sent them on their way. This says a lot. It says one thing, I'm not the least bit worried about you. Come, here, have some food. Go home. If you release your enemy, you are not scared of them at all. You're not worried about them. As a matter of fact, you're saying, send me some more. And the Syrian king's like, I'm done. Can you imagine how good he would have felt if he had just gotten that message sooner? You got to figure it out before this. And all this stuff had to happen. Oh, hey, the God of Israel is against me. I think I'll back up. Would have gone better for a whole lot of nations, actually. It'd go better for us, too. Look at where God is working. Follow his lead. Let him show you things. Let him show you who he is. I want to invite you just to think about God for a second. Think about what he's shown you in your life. I mean, I'm looking out, I see a bunch of Christians, and if I'm calling it wrong and you're not, and you haven't asked Jesus to be your Savior, you should do that. I mean, I can't put too important of a point on that. Eternity's on the line with that decision. Trusting God versus trusting yourself. What if God had never shown you anything, and all you had was his word? I think for me that'd be enough. But it doesn't stop there. He's shown me stuff. He's shown you stuff. Not your heads. He has shown you stuff, right? There was one time, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to get done with this quick. There was one time that I talked about seeing God, and I had to back it up a little bit. When I said, well, I hadn't seen God, but there was a time, I've got to give you a condensed story, but there was a time when I was at Falls Creek, and we were having a worship time, and I got down on my knees in the middle of 5,000 people because I just couldn't stand any longer. I had to just bow before my God. It was in my head to do it. Now, it's toward the front of that group. So the first time I heard that, I was like, no. I'm not going to get all showy with my faith right here. If I'd have been in the back, I'd have hit my knees immediately. But I was in the front. I didn't want anybody to see me doing that. I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to act like I'm somebody, right? So I didn't, and and the voice got louder and louder. So finally I was like, I hit that point where I didn't care anymore. I'm just going to bow down before my God while I'm singing this song that you're singing. So I got on my knees while I was singing. As soon as my knees touched ground, as soon as knees hit concrete there, something happened to me that has never before since happened to me. I was, no other way to say it, I was in the presence of God. If you can imagine being hugged by light itself. Nothing else was there anymore. I couldn't hear any music. I couldn't hear anything going around me. I saw nothing but light. In a good way. It wasn't blinding or anything else. It was just all bright. It was a moment that God gave me, I believe, for being obedient in the moment. And I've never had it again. But let me tell you, I mean, that messed me up, that moment with God. Coming home from that, getting out of that moment, all I wanted to do was get back into it. I'd have stayed there on my knees and died of thirst. I didn't care. But it was gone. I made it, honestly, about, 100 yards, and I was on my knees praying again. I just could not walk. But guys, God will show you things if you'll let him. Like I said, I'm an old guy. I'm 59, and it's happened one time in my life that he did that. There's other times where God has less dramatically shown himself and working around me and through me and stuff like that. But you got moments too. And we don't talk about the really big ones much because people are going to look at you like you're nuts, right? because God has actually interacted with you. The thing is, he's supernaturally interacting with everybody else too. We always don't talk about it that much because we don't want to be like crazy people. Even Baptists, we like to be calm. But God is working, giving credit. I'm not going to think you're nuts. You might think I am. That's okay. I want to invite you to pray right now. Just think about surrendering to God.